She almost didn't take the job. Standing outside the iron gates that morning, Elena Cruz told herself it was just a house. A big, cold, ugly house, full of rich people who wouldn't look twice at a girl like her. She told herself that so she'd stop shaking. She lied. The mansion rose from the cliff top like something that had swallowed the sky glass and black stone, brutal and beautiful, perched above the ocean as if daring it to rise. Armed guards stood at every entrance, earpieces glinting, faces blank as walls. Cameras tracked the driveway in slow, patient arcs. It wasn't a home. It was a kingdom. And someone cruel lived inside it. That was what people said anyway. Elena had heard the name before she'd ever applied, whispered over kitchen tables, dropped in hushed conversations that stopped the moment a stranger walked in. Volkov, 26 years old, controlled half the city's underground before most men his age had learned to tie a tie. People said he was ice-blooded, said he never raised his voice because he'd never needed to, said the last man who stole from him hadn't just lost his hands, his entire family paid for it too. She didn't know if any of it was true. She knew she was 19, 3 weeks behind on rent, and that the agency had offered her double rate for this placement and hadn't told her why. She should have asked why. The other staff taught her the rules before she'd even unpacked her uniform. Not in a meeting, not written anywhere, just in snatched moments, lowered voices, eyes that flicked to doorways before mouths moved. Don't run indoors. Running meant something was wrong, and Volkov didn't like problems he hadn't made himself. Don't speak first. If he addressed you, answer in as few words as possible. If he didn't, you were furniture. Be furniture. Never, ever be interesting. That was the one that settled heaviest in Elena's chest. Because interesting meant noticed. And noticed, here, could mean anything. She'd watched it happen to a girl named Sophia in her first week. A laugh too loud in a corridor the boss happened to walk through, one unguarded moment of being herself, and suddenly Sophia was being reassigned. Not fired, reassigned. To what? No one would say. No one wanted to know. Maybe there had been more to it. In this house, there was always more. The mansion swallowed people whole. Elena had survived too much to become a cautionary whisper. She'd come here for one reason: clean the rooms, send money home, stay invisible, leave 6 months, maybe less, if she was careful. She would be a shadow. She would be nothing. She would learn every pattern of his schedule, every floor he preferred, every corridor he used, and she would be somewhere else. Simple. Except nothing about this place was simple. She found that out on her third day. When she turned a corner she wasn't supposed to turn, and walked directly into a wall of black fabric and cologne and stillness, and looked up into the coldest gray eyes she had ever seen. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at her for one long surgical second, the way a man looks at something that has suddenly become relevant. Elena felt her entire plan unravel. Don't be interesting. Too late. Nobody moved. That was the thing Elena would remember later, lying awake in her narrow staff bed with her heart still misfiring in her chest. Not what he said, not what she did. Just the stillness, the way the entire corridor seemed to hold its breath, as if the mansion itself had learned to go quiet when he was present. Adrian Volkov was not what she'd imagined. She'd built him in her mind from rumor and warning, something monstrous, oversized, loud in the way powerful men often were, a fist in a suit. But the man standing 3 feet from her was composed in a way that felt almost violent. Tall, dark-suited, shoulders cut like architecture. Even standing still, he looked built for command. His jaw was sharp enough to draw blood. His dark hair swept back from a face that would have been beautiful if it hadn't looked so utterly finished with the world. And those eyes, gray. Not soft gray, not the gray of fog or winter sky. The gray of gunmetal, of something engineered to cause damage. They moved over her once, slowly, the way you assess a room for exits. Elena opened her mouth, closed it. Her training manual had said nothing about this. Her body had forgotten language entirely. "You're new," he said. Not a question, a filing of information. His voice was low and unhurried, and it landed somewhere behind her sternum like a stone dropped into still water. "Yes, one word. Be furniture. Be nothing." "I'm sorry, I didn't know this corridor was—" "It isn't restricted." She blinked. "Oh, you assumed it was." She stopped. He wasn't wrong. She had assumed, from the way the senior staff talked about the East Wing, that every shadow in this place carried a rule attached to it. "I suppose I did." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, not quite, but a flicker of something that suggested he'd once known what smiling was. "Cruz," he said. Her blood went cold. "How do you—" "I know everyone in my house." He said it simply, without arrogance, as a man states gravity or mathematics. Then he looked away, back down the corridor, already moving. "Stay out of the study on the 3rd floor. That one is restricted." And then he was gone. Elena stood alone in the hallway for a full minute before she remembered to breathe. He knew her name. She'd been here 3 days. She'd been a ghost. She was certain of it. Careful footsteps, averted eyes, the performance of invisibility she'd been rehearsing since childhood. And he knew her name. She walked back to the staff quarters slowly, replaying every second, turning it over for threat or meaning. "It's nothing," she told herself. "He knows everyone's name. He said so." But that flicker at his mouth, that almost thing, followed her all the way to her room and sat down beside her on the bed. She barely slept. In the daylight, the mansion revealed itself slowly, like a secret told in pieces. Elena learned it the way she learned everything, quietly, methodically, with the particular alertness of someone who had grown up in spaces where the wrong move cost something. She catalogued the rooms as she cleaned them. Marble floors so polished they mirrored the sky. Bookshelves that covered entire walls, filled not with decorative spines but with red books, cracked, annotated, some lying open as though he'd walked away mid-sentence. She hadn't expected that. The art unsettled her more. Not the grand oil paintings in the entrance hall, those were performance, status made visible. It was the smaller pieces she kept noticing. A sketch in charcoal hung without a frame inside a guest bathroom no one used. A ceramic figure on a corridor windowsill, chipped at the base. Personal things, kept things. Someone had chosen these, she thought. Probably him. It made him harder to fear cleanly. Dasha, the head housekeeper, caught Elena studying a painting near the library, a dark seascape, oil on canvas, amateur work, but fierce with it, waves that looked like they were fighting the frame. "Don't linger," Dasha said, not unkindly, "not near anything that matters to him." "How do you know what matters to him?" Dasha's expression shifted something between pity and caution. "You learn," she said. "You pay attention, and eventually you learn. The trick is not letting him notice you're learning." Elena hesitated. "Has he ever hurt anyone here?" Dasha paused for a long moment. "Not without reason," she said finally. Then she added quietly, "But he has reasons for things that other people wouldn't call reasons." She wasn't going to go. She had told herself that firmly on day 4, day 5, and again on the morning of day 6 while standing at the bottom of the east staircase with her cleaning cart and looking up. Stay out of the study on the 3rd floor. He had said it clearly, the only instruction Adrian Volkov had given her personally. Elena was not the kind of person who tested invisible fences. She knew what happened when small people made powerful men feel disobeyed. She had grown up understanding that kind of risk. She went to the 3rd floor because of the cat. The mansion had a sleek gray creature that appeared and disappeared like smoke. No one claimed ownership of it, yet it moved through the house as though it belonged to every room. That morning, it wound around Elena's ankles near the 2nd floor landing before darting up the next flight of stairs. Elena's cleaning list included the 3rd floor corridor. The study itself was off limits. The corridor was not. She was only following the cat. She told herself that until she almost believed it. The third-floor hallway was quieter than the rest of the mansion, the kind of quiet that had weight. Carpet-muffled footsteps and the windows facing the ocean let in pale light that seemed to flatten sound itself. The study door stood at the end of the corridor. Dark wood, slightly open. Elena stopped 10 feet away. She straightened a decorative vase that didn't need straightening, adjusted the curtain tieback that had been perfectly placed moments earlier. Absolutely did not looked. Through the narrow gap, she could see the room clearly enough. A wide desk sat in the center, crowded with documents and maps. A laptop glowed cold blue in the dim light. Shelves lined the walls, not decorative books like the ones downstairs, but labeled binders and files. A corkboard hung beside the desk. Photographs, names, red lines connecting them like a web. And Adrian Volkov stood at the window. His back was turned to the door. One hand rested against the glass as he stared out over the ocean far below the cliffs. He didn't move. From this angle, he didn't look like the terrifying man the rumors described. He looked almost human, almost like someone carrying something too heavy to set down. Elena stepped backward before she could stop herself. The wheel of her cleaning cart knocked lightly against the wall. The sound cracked through the quiet. She froze. A long pause followed. Then, without turning, he spoke. "The corridor was clean yesterday," he said mildly. Her heart nearly stopped. I was just finishing the windows," she managed. "The cat," he said calmly. "She does that. Leads people, places they were trying not to go." Heat flooded Elena's face. "I'm sorry, sir. You can go, Cruz." She left immediately. But as she turned the corner, she heard something faint behind her. Not quite a laugh. Something close to it. The staff dinner happened every evening at 6 in the basement kitchen. The table was long and wooden, scarred from years of use. Meals were simple but filling: soup, bread, roasted vegetables, occasionally meat when the deliveries were good. Elena sat at the far end. She preferred listening. Conversations here had a strange architecture. Words were carefully chosen, topics gently redirected. People talked about weather, deliveries, and schedules, but never about the work done upstairs. Never about the boss. The security guards sometimes joined them. When they did, they sat together in an unspoken cluster, eating quickly and speaking little. 2 of them were young, not much older than 19-year-old Elena. Sometimes she caught them glancing at her in the quiet, curious way men sometimes looked at things they weren't sure they were allowed to want. She kept her eyes on her plate. It was Mikhail who spoke to her that evening. He was one of the senior guards, broad shoulders, heavy beard, the calm presence of someone who had been doing dangerous work long enough to become comfortable with silence. "Volkov eats alone," he said suddenly. Elena looked up. "Always?" "As long as I've worked here," he shrugged slightly. "Sometimes he has guests, business partners, but that's not dinner." "What is it then?" "Negotiation." He wiped his hands with a napkin. "The table becomes the arena." Elena absorbed that quietly. "He doesn't eat with people he isn't willing to destroy," Mikhail added. The words were spoken without drama, just fact. Elena thought about the corridor, about the quiet, almost laugh. "He spoke to me today," she said before she could stop herself. Nothing at the table visibly changed, but something shifted beneath the surface. Dasha looked up briefly. "What about?" "The corridor," Elena said quickly. "Nothing important." "Good," Mikhail said, not unkindly, but firmly. Elena finished eating in silence. She reminded herself why she was here. Rent, money home, 6 months. Stay invisible. But invisibility, she was beginning to realize, required constant effort. And sometimes the house itself seemed determined to notice you. She found the book by accident. 2 weeks into the job, Elena was assigned the dawn shift, 5 in the morning. The mansion felt different at that hour, quieter, almost suspended. Ocean light filtered through the windows in soft, gray waves. Her cleaning cart rolled silently along the upper corridor. By now, Elena knew the house well. Which doors creaked, which floorboards spoke, which cameras moved. And she had learned something else. Adrian Volkov rarely slept before 3 in the morning. She knew this not from gossip but from observation. Lights remained on behind his study door long after midnight. Sometimes, when she woke in the night, she would see the faint glow beneath the door from the hallway upstairs. She imagined him sitting there, surrounded by maps and files, the ocean visible through the glass wall behind his desk. The book lay near the reading alcove at the end of the corridor. It didn't look dropped. It looked placed, as though someone had intended to return. Elena picked it up. The cover was worn and written in Russian. Inside the front page were 2 neat initials written in dark ink. AV 2016. He would have been 16 then. She stood there longer than she should have. Holding the book felt strangely intimate proof that Adrian Volkov had once been a boy who wrote his name in the front of his belongings. She placed it carefully on the table in the alcove, exactly where he would notice it. Then she continued her cleaning. When she passed the same hallway an hour later, the book was gone. In its place sat a single glass of water, still cold. Elena stared at it for several seconds. It wasn't a gift. It couldn't be. It was probably left by someone else. A coincidence. She picked up the glass and carried it downstairs to the kitchen. But when she washed it, her hands trembled slightly. The storm arrived from the ocean just after midnight. Elena woke to the sound of wind pressing against the windows like a living thing. Rain lashed the glass, sharp and relentless, and lightning tore brief white cracks through the dark sky beyond the cliffs. She sat up in the narrow bed inside the staff quarters and listened. The mansion felt different during storms. The usual silence was replaced by a restless tension, the kind that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. The wind moved through the cypress trees outside, bending their dark shapes sideways. Thunder rolled slowly across the water. Elena knew she should go back to sleep. Her shift started in a few hours. Instead, she wrapped a cardigan around her shoulders and walked quietly to the window. The ocean below the cliffs was barely visible, a shifting black mass beneath the flashes of lightning. And then she heard it. Music. Soft. Measured. A piano. At first, she thought she had imagined it just another sound carried by the storm. But the notes came again, slow and deliberate. Elena slipped out of her room and into the corridor. The mansion was dark at this hour. The overhead lights dimmed. Only the occasional security lamp illuminated the hallways. The music drifted through the house like a thread guiding her. Second floor. East wing. The music room. She stopped just outside the door. It was slightly open. Through the narrow gap she could see the piano, and Adrian Volkov seated at the bench. His jacket was gone, sleeves rolled to his elbows. One lamp lit the room with a warm golden glow that pushed back the shadows. He played slowly, carefully. The piece was familiar. Gymnopédie, No. 1. Elena recognized it immediately. Her mother used to play it on the radio on quiet mornings while cooking breakfast. But this version was slower. The notes carried weight, stretching into the silence between them. Adrian's expression was different here. The hard composure he carried during the day was gone. In its place was something quieter, something tired. The music filled the room, mingling with the sound of rain against the windows. Elena stood frozen in the hallway. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Adrian Volkov didn't look like the man the city feared. He looked like someone remembering something painful. The realization unsettled her more than the rumors ever had. She stepped back carefully, retreating down the corridor without making a sound. By the time she returned to her room, the storm had begun to fade. But the music lingered in her mind long after the final notes disappeared. 6 months here suddenly felt like a very long time. 3 weeks passed. The rules changed. Not officially. No one announced it. But Elena felt the difference in small ways. Doors that used to be locked were left open when she arrived to clean. Security guards who once ignored her now greeted her by name. Dasha assigned her easier sections of the mansion. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Adrian Volkov had begun noticing her. Not in obvious ways. He didn't call her to his office. He didn't give her orders. Instead, it happened in passing moments. A pause in the hallway. A glance that lasted a second longer than necessary. A door held open when she approached with her cleaning cart. Dasha noticed it too. She said nothing about it, but Elena saw the awareness in her eyes. The mansion had rules. Everyone knew them, and one of those rules was simple. The boss did not notice the staff until he did. It happened again on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena was crossing the entrance hall with a stack of fresh towels when Adrian walked through the front doors. Two security guards followed a few steps behind him, but they stopped when he raised a hand. He looked at Elena directly. "How are you finding it here?" he asked. She blinked. "The work?" she said. "The house." Elena hesitated. She knew the safe answer. "It's wonderful, sir. Thank you for the opportunity." But the words that came out were different. "It's beautiful," she said slowly, "and lonely. I suppose beautiful places often are." The silence that followed stretched longer than expected. Adrian studied her with that same careful attention he had shown the first time they met. Then he nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. "Just that. Yes." His phone rang. The moment broke. He answered the call and walked away across the marble floor without another word. Elena stood there alone in the entrance hall, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been. The rules had changed, and she wasn't sure whether that was a good thing. The problem with gravity is that it never asks permission. Elena had spent most of her life learning how to avoid dangerous attachments. Trust carefully, hope carefully, want carefully. Desire had consequences. She had learned that lesson early, but something about the mansion made those rules harder to follow. It wasn't one moment. It was the accumulation of many small ones. The book left in the corridor. The piano music during the storm. The way Adrian said her name. The way he looked at her sometimes, as if considering a possibility he hadn't expected. She told herself it meant nothing. He controlled half the city. People feared him. People disappeared around him. Whatever existed between them was an illusion created by proximity. Nothing more. Still, she found herself pausing outside the study door sometimes, listening for footsteps in the corridor, choosing routes through the mansion that increased the chances of seeing him. One afternoon, Mikhail found her sitting on the garden terrace with a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. The ocean stretched endlessly below the cliffs, waves crashing against the rocks far below. "You've got the look," he said, as he sat down beside her. "What look?" Elena asked. "The one people get when they think they're starting to understand this place." She frowned. "What does that mean?" Mikhail watched the ocean for a moment before answering. "This house does something strange to people," he said. "It shows you pieces of him." "Pieces?" "Little things. Enough that you start believing you understand the whole story." Elena said nothing. Mikhail stood up. "Just remember something," he added. "What?" He built his entire life making sure no one ever understands the whole picture. Then he walked away. Elena remained on the terrace long after he left. The ocean moved slowly against the cliff face below. Endless, relentless, like gravity. And whether she wanted it or not, she was already falling.